Hi, welcome everyone. Thank you all for joining us today. My name is Crystal and I'm the community manager at Ning. I'm here with Juana from the Ning advocacy team and Richard Millington, the founder of FeverBee, an online community consultancy, and your presenter this hour as he answers your community questions. So this is our 14th community management talk with Richard and the first we've done as an open Q&A like this. Richard has already shared strategies for generating activity, managing growth, facilitating member engagement, converting newcomers into active members, and some social sciences for community managers. All those recorded presentations are available on the Ning blog at cultivate.ning.com. And we'll be uploading the recording for today's presentation as well. So if you missed part of it or you just want to revisit it at a later date, we've got you covered. I also invite you all to contribute to the conversation on Twitter using the hashtag NingTalk. So a little bit about our presenter today. Richard has spent the last 10 years mastering a range of social sciences, refining key community management skills, learning how to use and apply data, collaborating with over 100 different organizations, and amassing a collection of case studies to tackle every situation. His latest book, Buzzing Communities, How to Build Bigger, Better, and More Active Online Communities, takes the same hard look at the data, social science behind online community management. It's a really great read, well worth your time. Definitely go ahead and pick it up. And as Rich is showing you right now, you can preview half of the book for free by going to feverbee.com/ning.html. If you're interested in studying the discipline of community management even further, I'd also recommend checking out FeverBee's professional community management course by heading to course.feverbee.com. So we are going to start off this hour of Q&A with some questions that were submitted by y'all during registration. And I'm sure you're going to think up some more great questions throughout this webinar. So please submit them using the questions feature. And anything we don't get around to today or isn't necessarily, in Rich's wheelhouse is something that maybe would be better for a Ning representative to answer. We'll cover in a follow-up blog post or possibly in another webinar. So without further ado, I'll let Richard take some opening remarks if he'd like to, and then we will start with some questions.
Sure, thanks a lot for that kind introduction again, Crystal. So the goal today is to try and give everyone an opportunity to ask the questions that will directly help their online community efforts. What we've been doing in the past 13 sessions that we've done is trying to give you as much information as possible about how online communities work, how to manage online communities, how to grow online communities. But one of the challenges that we've found with all these webinars is that you need a time and a place for people to ask questions about their specific communities, how to adapt that material to the communities that they're working on. And we only usually leave like 5 or 10 minutes at the end of the webinar to do that. And inevitably, we run out of time, and that always leaves some people upset. So what we're going to try and do today is give everyone the opportunity to ask questions, to get help. And you can be as specific as you like, you can be as broad as you like. If there are questions that are specifically related to the technology of Ning, such as how to embed videos or something like that, that's probably not the best question that I can help with. But I'm going to do my best with everything I can do. And what we're going to try and do as well is try and help you explain how we would approach the issues that you're tackling if you were a client of ours. We've worked with a lot of organizations in this space, and so it'd be good for us to have an opportunity to explain what we would approach, how we would approach each of the issues that you face. So I'm going to throw open the floor right now. If you have a question to ask, now's a good time.
Okay, so as we start to see some questions come in, I'm going to take one of the questions from our pre-registration question opportunity. So this one comes from Gordon Howard, who runs Garden How To Online Community. And he wants to know how to attract visitors to a community and retain them as dedicated members. We've covered this in a couple previous webinars, so in the follow-up blog post, we'll link to the more thorough explanations of this. But could you give kind of a few of your top tips on how to attract members and retain them?
Sure. So this obviously is a very broad question that we've covered in a different webinar. What I'll explain is that when you're trying to get people to join a community, you have to understand what the messages are that you're going to tell them, and also how to find those people in the first place. What we typically advise is that when you're just trying to get a community off the ground, when you're trying to reach that critical mass point, where more than 50% of the growth and the activity is generated by the community, you're typically looking at direct growth tactics. That usually means individually reaching out to people and asking them if they want to be involved in the community, asking them if they want to be one of the founding members of the community, and using your existing relationships to make that community succeed. If you don't have any existing relationships before you launch the community, it's usually a good idea to build those relationships before you launch the community. A couple of years ago, we wrote a book called The Proven Path, which you can get as well if you go to this link below. And what we found when we were researching that book about how successful communities got off the ground is that every single one that we spoke to every single person that launched one of the successful communities from those we spoke to, they already had those existing relationships. They already had a good group of friends that they could invite to join the community to make sure that the community was a success in the very early stages. So if you have existing mailing lists, existing contacts, a lot of the original growth is going to come from them. However, as your community grows, you can't always rely upon that small network that you have. So you have to move to more referral-based or word-of-mouth-based tactics. So for example, what is a typical tactic would be to ask each one of your members to share their best piece of advice about the topic, their best story about their topic. So for example, I've seen a community of metal detectors where everyone was invited to share, the most amazing thing that they've ever found, and then they turned that into an ebook. So that's an ebook that you can just use in Word if you want. If you have Word, you can save it as a PDF, and then you can send it out to your members with links back to the community. And what's interesting about this is that then every single member that is featured in that ebook, and it can be as big as you want it to be, but every single one of them shares it with everyone that they know. And that's an incredibly powerful referral-based tactic. But not only that, what also happens is that you have this material, this asset now, that you can use to give to people when they join or when they sign up for that community. You can use it to get people to the community in the first place. So there's a lot of tactics you can do there. Other things we've found work well is to have, so for example, if there's someone that has a popular blog in your field, someone that writes a magazine column in your field, someone that runs a relevant organization in your field, you can interview them within the community and then see if they will provide a link back. So then they send their audience to you as well, and it's an easy way to get that community off the ground. If there is a topical issue in your field, if you can interview, say, the top 5 experts that you can find and publish that as a news post or as a column or something like that, it's very likely that those 5 people will link to it. Again, sending more traffic to your online community. So there's lots of tactics that you can use like that are very effective to get people to join the community in the first place. To get them to actually convert, one of the things that we've seen work best isn't to tell people to join the community. No one right now is looking to join a community because they don't know what they're missing. What they are looking to do is something that benefits them straight away. So what we find is that it's far better to tell people to do something within the community, to participate within a relevant discussion within that community, to submit their best idea on a particular issue, something that's going to get them that when they join the community, they're in that participating mindset. They're in that mindset where they want to participate in something specific. So once they do that, they make their contribution, they receive a notification of responses to that, so they're far more likely to come back and visit again, and then over time become a regular member of that community. If you have, say, no existing contacts when you launch the community, I would recommend you go to Twitter, use the search feature there to find people that are talking about that topic. I would recommend you go to Amazon and look at the people that are commenting about the relevant books in that field as well, and see if they're interested in joining the community. I would go to Facebook, I would go to LinkedIn, I would go to the other platforms that already exist and see if we can get those people to join a community, if we can build relationships with those people first, to get that initial awareness, to get that community off the ground. And finally, as the community grows and develops and evolves, the key thing that you can have is to make your site the definitive place for its topic. So if you have a site about gardening, there's someone else that's typing on the line. It'd be good if you can put yourself on mute just for this. If you have someone else that is, sorry, if you have a community about gardening, for example, if you have a roundup of the best advice about gardening, the best tools to use, the best places to buy gardening equipment, if you have all the definitive advice about that, if you try and create this sort of foundation content that members can contribute to, then that community becomes a definitive place for its topic, and people naturally begin to gravitate towards that. So that's kind of a long and lengthy answer to the first question, but I hope it helps. And Gordon, if you have any other questions, don't hesitate to ask.
Thanks so much, Richard. That was a great answer. Our next question comes from Rusty Keeble. Rusty works in a law enforcement industry where connecting with colleagues and collaborating is vital, but the fear of sharing information is prevalent. Do you have any suggestions or tips for mitigating some of that fear of sharing information to try to get a better collaboration going?
Sure, we actually have some experience in the law enforcement field. Many years ago, we were working with an organization that made gun holsters. They also wanted to build a community for law enforcement professionals. The problem is that law enforcement professionals only wanted to interact with other people that were working in law enforcement. And obviously, that means it has to be a private community. Because, you know, with gun holsters especially, there are certain ways, certain clips or techniques that prevent someone that's not supposed to get their gun from getting the gun out of the holster. So you don't want the criminals or the people you're arresting to be able to grab their gun or have the knowledge of knowing how to do it. So we found a couple of things tended to be very important here. The first one, obviously, was the privacy issue. We found for the more specific that community is, the more difficult it is to be a participant within that topic, the bigger the dangers are. So, for example, teaching, law enforcement, security, those sorts of fields, then the community usually has to be a private community, and it usually has to have a very good system of verifying who is a registered member or who should be allowed to join and who isn't. It can't be a self-select thing. There has to be a verification process in place. If you look at what Police One do, which I think is a law enforcement community as well, they verify every single cop's badge number. So it takes a long time to do, but it also means that the people participating know that they're participating with people like them. Assuming you've got through that stage, I'm guessing that some people don't participate because sharing knowledge has a lot of social risks. First, you're basically admitting that you don't know something. And when you admit that you don't know something, that's quite a scary thing, because in some fields you're supposed to know everything. You don't want to be that vulnerable to a group and say that you don't know something. So you have to try and change that culture. It could also be a situation where members don't want to participate because they don't know the best way to participate. They're worried about asking questions that might seem dumb to other people. They're worried about asking questions that have been asked many times before. But they're worried more generally just about looking like an idiot, looking like someone that doesn't really belong as part of that crowd. So the key thing we found here is to sort out that newcomer or that visitor journey. So when someone visits your community, what information do they see? Do they see the latest culture of that community? Do they see information about what are the common questions? So imagine I join your website, your community tomorrow, and I assume I get a confirmation message. What information is in that confirmation email? What information do I get next? When I visit the community, is there a place for newcomers to ask questions that maybe get asked very often or maybe very intimidating to ask? is there a place where people can ask those sorts of questions? Um, it's a very good idea to lead by example as well. If you know that some people are afraid of asking certain questions, it's always a good idea to initiate a discussion on that topic yourself and let them join in. You want to be asking questions about the topics that are most difficult to talk about. So for example, a friend of ours runs a community for people that are affected by cancer. And the community was going well, but what she found was that people weren't really discussing the really difficult topics, the topics that are most difficult for people in that situation to talk about. And what we advised her to do was to initiate those discussions herself, because then it gives everyone that emotional safety that, okay, these are the sorts of things that I can discuss here. So you have to lead by example in that sense. So for her, that meant initiating discussions on, say, planning after death, initiating discussions about how to plan for your funeral, or dealing with relatives that are upset, or dealing with some of the very specific biological issues that are affected by cancer as well. And when she did that, not everyone participated in those discussions, but instantly the types of discussions that she began to get were far more useful to the people that were participating. So I hope that makes sense. The other thing that would be relevant here is to make sure it's clear what the benefits are, to have some case studies of people that have benefited from the community, to have a regular place where you can highlight what the community has achieved each week and make participating in that community more of a bonding experience for that group. So if, say, every Friday you have a news story about what the community has achieved or what members in the community have learned, that can be a very useful thing because it gets everyone into that mindset of participating. And the final thing I would add is that there's a psychological tactic that we've seen work well, which is to prime people to be in that participation mindset when they join the community. And the way we do that is by asking them, what can they offer the community? In a registration form or shortly after they join, we ask the question, what can you offer this community? What skills or what experience do you have that you can contribute to that community? So then when they visit the community, they already know what they're going to share, what information they're looking for, what discussions they're going to participate in. And also, perhaps most importantly, it's very useful for you as well. So you have a lot of information about what content to create, what discussions to initiate, what events and activities to host as well. So I hope that helps.
That was a great tip there, especially that last point of really using what your members can bring to the community and what they want out of the community to shape a lot of the content that you put on your community. So next we're going to start taking some questions from our participants who are live on the line. So first question we've got from Eric Herboltz, and his question is, how do you start to pick a community platform? I should also mention we have a recently released white paper authored by Randy Farmer, who is the author of Building Web Reputation Systems. So I'll make sure to link to that in the follow-up materials to this. And the topic of that is 5 questions for building an online community platform. But I think Richard's perspective here would be really valuable because a lot of what you do at Fever Bee Community Consultancy is advising your clients which platform to go with. So when you're looking at a client who's coming to you wanting to build a community, what do you look at when picking a community platform?
So that's a good question. We actually wrote a post about this really recently as well, so I can head down to it and show you what we wrote then. What we found about community platforms is that it matters a lot what kind of organization you are. So for example, the resources and the budget you have is very important. So the first thing that we tend to do, and obviously I'm biased towards Ning here because I love you guys, but what we tend to do is that first we look at what the budget is and what the resources of the organization are and what skills they have. And by that I mean, if you say don't have a developer in-house, if you have a limited budget, then maybe an open source solution or an enterprise solution isn't the best option for you. If you don't have the skill to maintain a community platform, then maybe that solution isn't good for you. So the first thing we try to do is look at what category of platform we're looking at here. So the options here are the broadly traditional platforms like forums and mailing lists, white label platforms like Ning, open source platforms like Drupal or Joomla, the vertical enterprise platforms like platforms for associations or in healthcare, the business enterprise platforms like Lithium and Jive, and then the bespoke platforms, which, to be honest, I recommend that you don't do. We want to know what sort of budget the organization has. We want to know what resources they have and what skills they have. So this will tell you what category of platform you're looking at. Is it traditional, white label, open source, or enterprise? And then once we have that, we try to make sure that we're backing the right horse. So by backing the right horse, I mean a platform that has a good long-term future. So if you go to Google Trends, for example, let me do that here. Bear with me. So if you go to Google Trends, and this isn't exact, and type in, say, vBulletins, which is a forum package. And if you have a faster internet than what I have, so if you look at what's going on with vBulletin right now, you might look at this and think, well, maybe vBulletin isn't the best long-term solution. Maybe it doesn't look like it has a long-term future for me. So you might think, okay, well, maybe that's not the platform we want to use. We might also look at whether the platform is innovating or not. So by innovating, we look to see when was the last time that they released an update. So we look to see when the latest version of vBulletin was released. You can go to their website to check that, and they usually have it on Wikipedia as well. So if we go to Wikipedia, and then we see that the last release was 5.1 on March the 19th, 2014. So we can see that as quite recent. So they're still updating the platform, and that's broadly a good sign. And then we'll also look at any other relevant information. So we know here that they're struggling. We know because we know the history that they're struggling with competitors. We know they're struggling with a few other things as well. We'll look to see who owns them. Are they investing in the company or not? So if you go to Crunchbase, for example, we have a whole system that we go through here, and we type in the bulletin. So this will give you an idea of what corporate news is being announced, what sort of funding they have, and who they're competing against. Here you can see there's not much information here. It doesn't look like that they're being heavily invested in. If I compare that to, say, Jive, if you don't mind me listing any competitors, Crystal. So if you look at Jive here, you see that they're being acquired by Clara. They have an IPO valuation of over $1 billion. They clearly have a lot of funding. You can look at their milestones. You look at what money that they've received. You can look at the key people they have. You can see if they're making a lot of acquisitions as well. So you can see just by looking at this that these guys have a lot of funding, and it looks like that they have a good future. So if we type in Jive, for example, and again, this will cover a lot of other things. So maybe we want to be more specific. Jive software. So if we take out the bulletin, so here we can broadly see, and again, this isn't exact, but we can broadly see that it seems to be in much better health than what vBulletin is. So we make sure that we're picking a platform that looks like it has a positive long-term future. We want to look at the trends. We want to look at their Crunchbase and the status of the company. If we have access to their accounts as well, we also look at that. We look to see what sort of feature updates are going on. We also very often go to a site called the admin zone. I don't know if you guys are aware of this, but if you go to the admin zone, especially for forum-based software, they will tend to spend a lot of time talking about this. You can go to eMint as well, and you can search for a variety of terms, but you can see what these guys think of the platform. You can ask questions, you can get help. So in this community here, you can ask a lot of questions in the forum discussions. So you can ask in here and you can get a lot of help as well. And there's the eMint group that you get help from. So let's assume that we've crossed out the platforms that don't have a good long-term future. Next, we want to look at successful examples. So we get references, we want levels of activity, We want to talk to as many people as possible that are using that platform and see what they think. Not just the people that the company recommends, but we want to talk to the people that are actually using that platform that haven't been directed by the company, their usual testimonials. Then we use our feature set. We check they have all the right features. Then we have the whole negotiation process and the pricing and the contract. And here it becomes more vague depending upon what platform you're picking. But this is the process that we generally go through. I mean, and every stage is important. It's important to get the right category. It's important to get a platform that has a good long-term future, because the last thing you want to be doing is changing from one platform to the other. It's good to look for successful examples. It's good to check they have the right features that they need. And it's good to make sure that you are negotiating and you are validating the price in the contract. So I hope that makes sense, and I hope that answers your question.
Wonderful. Thanks, Rich. We're getting a few questions from people about the topic of migration from Ning 2.0 to 3.0. And I think that's a really great topic that I'm actually going to look at scheduling another webinar with a few of our Ning advocacy and support members to possibly cover that in detail at a later time. But in general, what are your, since a lot of Ning network creators are going to be looking at this platform change, while it's still on the same basic platform, there are going to be some differences for members and for administrators. So do you have any best practices or tips, Richard, for breaking this change to your administrators and your community members?
Sure. So so back when I was like 18 or 19 or so, I was into video games a lot. And the one thing that would always happen is that whenever the game changed, whenever they did an automatic update, which happened on games like Counter-Strike and the Steam games and all that, what you'd find is that everyone would hate it. No matter if the update was really good, everyone would hate it. And it was an instant reaction because people go there, they use it, they don't want it changed. So no matter what you do, people usually don't like to change. And the common theory is that if you tell members in advance, if you get them involved in the changes as much as possible, then they're going to be far more receptive to it. And we've tried this many, many times, and it doesn't really make that much of a difference. What we have found is that when you make the change, people will complain like crazy. However, it's not the initial responses that you want to listen to, unless they're saying that something is broken. You know, this link does not work. Then yes, you want to fix that. But what you want to be listening to is what are they saying after 2 or 3 weeks. Once they've gotten used to it, once they've accepted that this is what the new platform is, you're not going back to the old one. What are the responses then? What are they complaining about? What are they doing? So if you're tracking your data, you can see if after the change, are they participating more or are they participating less? You can see what impact that change has actually had. So we're far more interested in that. And if that's not a response that you like the most, then I guess the only other thing I would say is to just keep people involved very early on. Make a case that everyone sees that there is going to be a big change that's going to come. And that's the other hard part of this. It's hard to get everyone to read any piece of information. Usually only a minority of the members of the community will actually read anything you post at any particular time. That makes communicating any change very difficult. If I send an email out right now to my mailing list saying I will give you 10,000 US dollars, I'm going to bet that most people won't read it. That's how busy we are. That's how many signals that we get. That's how many inputs we get every single day. It's too hard to pick out one single thing. So you can use a lot of repetition to tell members that a change is going to come and what that change is going to be. Or you can ask, or you can just tell them, the members that are listening, what's going to happen and get them involved. But to be honest, I would just say you have to be prepared for when you make that change that is going to be a negative response, and just ride that out at first. Fix anything that's obviously broken, and then see what it's like after a couple of weeks. And usually you find that the level of activity has gone up, and that's what you really want to be paying attention to here.
Those are some great things to keep in mind. Our next question is from Michael Morin, who's on the line, and he wants to know how often should admins be sending out email blasts to their members? I'm guessing this will probably vary based on communities, but have you noticed any kind of best practices or good timing issues related to that, Richard?
We've noticed a couple of things here. The first one, regular scheduled messages can work really well or really badly. Let me explain what that means. So they work really well when people are excited and looking forward to that information. And there isn't a lot of information that people are excited and looking forward to. So if you have, say, the latest spoilers of a television show, then people are going to be excited and looking forward to that, and that's going to be pretty useful, I think. But usually, it's better to have irregular messages. Messages that come out on a regular basis tend to be ignored. So news roundups, messages that just come out on that regular scheduled basis, digests of discussions, all these things tend to get ignored. And we prefer using a slightly different system where we have a couple of weeks where the email intensity maybe goes to 1 per week or maybe 2 or 3 per week. And then we might not use or not contact members for a week or so. I mean, again, this depends what kind of messages you're sending out as well. But if we have an upcoming event in the community that we think people should be attending, if we're interviewing one of the most well-known people in our field, then we want to be sending out a lot of messages before that, and we want to send out a couple of messages after that, telling people what they can look forward to, asking them to submit questions, asking them to attend, and then 1 or 2 messages doing a roundup and a summary and the implications for what it means in the future and what people would like to see in the future as well. And then we won't contact them again for a while until we have something really interesting and really exciting to tell them. The problem right now is that we're seeing that most organizations send out really dull messages, messages that aren't even remotely interesting to their members, and that's what we had to stop. So if I had to put a clear number on it, I would say if you're sending out a regular message still, then one email per week is usually more than enough. If you're doing lots of interesting, exciting things, then to have a short burst of activity followed by a brief silence is usually the best way forward.
We got a great lesson or a great question from Michael Lawson, who manages the Two Diabetes, which is a wonderful Ning community. So he asks, he's been managing a community for people with diabetes and have recently been polling lapsed members, folks who used to be very active and are not now, to find out why people became less active. Folks are telling me that after a while, they started seeing discussions of the same topics over and over again, hosted by new members who had not seen previous conversations on their topics of interest. Do you have suggestions for minimizing repetition so that longtime members don't get bored while still supporting new members in discussing their topics of interest?
Sure. I mean, usually what tends to happen is that there are some topics that come up again and again, but it's usually not that many. I mean, we're talking about less than 10. So the best thing to do here is to have a FAQ that you send out or you guide members to when they join a community. So one of the things we like to do when people join a community, and like we spoke about earlier, to reduce that social fear of asking dumb questions or questions that are asked many times in the past, is to guide members towards the discussions that have been asked a lot of times in the past. So if you send people when they join a notification just saying that they should check out the FAQ of the common questions that are asked or the common topics, but this FAQ itself is just a page listing links to the relevant discussions that are taking place, then that can be a good thing because then they can see that and they can participate there in those discussions. And there's a static page listing the topics that tend to come up the most, and members can easily find it and they can easily see it. So it doesn't always have to appear on the forums themselves, perhaps. It depends how you structure the forums as well, but that's usually the best way of doing it. So it's just one thread that covers that topic in considerable depth. We're seeing that usually the best way of doing it. Alternatively, like we said before, you can have an ebook that covers the best advice so everyone knows the answer to the common questions that are asked. Or you can just tell members this isn't the place for these types of discussions, you have to go here. But there's usually not that many discussions or that many topics that come up so many times. So it'd usually be one of those three things that we would do.
Awesome. Moving to a slightly different topic of more the professional community manager side, Alexander Bluckman asks, how do you get a job in community? It's really great to have talent and to have opportunity, but he's finding that not a lot of people are hiring. So, what advice do you have for him getting a job in community management?
Move to San Francisco. To be honest, like at the moment, there seems to be two things that are going on. One is that companies are hiring a lot of community managers. We speak to a lot of organizations, and they are struggling to fill all the positions that they have. I mean, even us, like we're struggling to fill all of the positions we have for community professionals. The other thing is that they tend to find that the community managers either don't have the right experience or don't have a lot of expertise in the field that they're trying to do. So community management seems to be splitting into two different roles. On one side, you've got more of the social media crowd who are very good at managing Facebook pages, responding to people, and generally being nice to people on the internet in a more customer service based role. And then you have the other side, people that are developing online communities, typically on more hosted platforms like Ning or Lithium Drive or Intelligent or those sorts of platforms. So we seem to be splitting into two different fields. What I would recommend you do is possibly to begin considering looking at a moderation role. So there's lots of moderation organizations that are out there, companies that are very good as well, like e-moderation, Quip. I don't know. There are lots of them. You can search for these, and you'll find many names. And they usually hire a lot of people who can manage a community on behalf of an organization. And that's an easy way to get started because then they train you up as well. Alternatively, and my favorite solution is that you start an online community, you grow it from scratch, because you learn so much doing that, you make so many contacts from doing that, and you also get the attention of the other people that are in that field. Or finally, you could do what my friend Charlie advocates a lot, which is to go to companies and say, listen, I mean, I want to learn this business, I want to help, I want to be involved. I mean, I'm happy to work for you for free for a couple of weeks or a couple of months or whatever works for you, just to prove to you how good I am. And by that point, you ingrain yourself so deeply into the company that they can't imagine you not being there. They can't imagine anyone else running that community but you. I've seen all three approaches work well. None of them are particularly easy to do, and they all have pros and cons. But if you want to get into the sector, you can either get lucky and apply to a company that hires you, or you can take one of those three routes, and hopefully one of them will help. I would also add
Wonderful.
that it really does help if you're. It really does help if you're living in the right location.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And I might be biased living in the San Francisco Bay Area, but I definitely do see a lot of job opportunities opening up in this area. So, location is a lot of it. A lot of them are or can be remote positions, so don't necessarily exclude anything that's outside of your geographical area.
Yeah,
Um,
and sorry, just dive in.
oh, go
If
ahead.
you're in New York, which I've just seen you are, Alex, then that's a good place to be. Also, attend the local community managers meetups that are going on there. I know there's a few around. I can't remember who's hosting them. And there will always be events that are taking place, big conferences and stuff like that. You might not be able to afford that, but these events are always looking for volunteers that can help out. So you can usually attend and usually have an excuse to meet people, collect cards, be in touch. And you're going to have to be pestering people in a very nice way, like crazy. Um, so yeah, that would help as well. So yeah, Crystal, please go ahead.
Oh, that's all right. The volunteering is a great point. I can speak to that personally, as that's pretty much how I got my job here at Ning. I went to meetups, I volunteered at every event that I could go to just to learn more. And I was noticed by the community manager at the time, Allison, for my tweeting at a meetup and
And
invited.
here you are.
And here I am. I was invited to a Ning 3.0 preview event. Then she brought me on as a community consultant, and now I'm community manager after she moved on to another company. So definitely, that's great advice, especially on the volunteering and just putting yourself out there. Next question I think we'll tackle is from Jeff Hora, who's been tweeting as well. So thank you for that, Jeff.
Hey, Jeff.
He asks, what are your tips on identifying internal community champs and enlisting their and their management's passion in building out a community? Do you find issues with politics as well?
Oh God, absolutely. This is one of the hardest parts of the work that we tend to do when we're working with organizations. Every organization is very different, many are very difficult, and every organization we've worked with has unique situations that they face. So it's hard to give advice that applies to every type of organization. What we have found is that very often we'll come to an organization and someone will say, we need this person, we need that person, and we need that person. And if we have them, they can advocate on behalf of their community. So we're going to schedule meetings with those 3 people, and then everything will take off really, really well. That usually doesn't work because those 3 people are very busy, they've got a lot of stuff going on, there's internal politics to deal with. So that's usually not the best approach that's going to work for you. I mean, you might get lucky, you might schedule meetings, you might persuade them, and then they might advocate heavily on your behalf. But it's usually very difficult to make people passionate about something they're not already passionate about. Which brings us to what we usually do. We usually look for people that have shown some level of interest or some level of passion within the group and get them involved in the community first. I don't particularly care what level they're at within the organization. What I do care is that when we're trying to get more internal buy-in, that there's a large group of people who are already behind this, who are already as involved as they can possibly be. So it's not their position so much we're interested in. We want to find people that have the passion and the interest in that topic and get them involved and actively participating in the community. Because the more you do this, the more you gradually, very slowly convert people, not by trying to change their mind in one meeting, but looking for people that have already shown some level of interest and then converting them. That's much easier to do. It's much easier to make a community successful doing that approach than trying to take a completely new approach and trying to get those key people going straight away, because that's going to be far more difficult.
Fantastic, thank you. I think, let's see, next one. Blake Hall has a couple of comments. He mentioned Metaverse Mod Squad. He wanted to put in a call for that when you were mentioning like e-moderation.
Yeah, they have a really good team.
So just wanted to do a little plug for that for Blake. And he had a great question. He knows that Patrick O'Keefe has covered monetization in a previous webinar, but feels that most of his ebook covers ads. So he wondered if you could discuss ways to monetize communities that aren't business owned other than ads.
Sure. Can I ask a clarify? I mean, this will help. It would help if I know if you're an independent or if you're working on behalf of an organization. Because the way that an organization will benefit from that community is very different from, say, an independent person would benefit from their community. So Patrick is great, and he has a terrific book, and he's an independent, and I think he's being very successful in what he does. You should get both of his books, actually. They're both really good. So our approach to monetizing a community or an audience or anything like that is to find out what they want and then develop those things for them. So there are so many things that you learn about your audience that only you really, really know. And so by mastering those things, you can explain exactly what they want. So for example, the book. So we have a big audience of community professionals. And when we were speaking to them, we found out there wasn't really any book that went very tactical into what community professionals need to do to make their community a success. So I wrote this book a couple of years ago, back in 2012, I think, and I made it a very purely tactical book because I knew from speaking to the audience that's what they wanted, and then I sold that. And so, like financially, it made a lot of sense to us. I get £5, I think maybe like $7 per copy of the book sold. We've sold maybe 10,000 copies of the book, so it's good money. Like you can monetize the audience by developing products and services for them. Like we have a training course as well, because when we were talking to members of the audience and when we saw what they were talking about, there was no formal training system. There's no way that people who very often drift into these sorts of roles could learn how to manage a community or how to do it really well, or the social sciences behind communities. So we developed a training course and then we sold it directly to the audience that had asked for these sorts of things. So it's very easy to sell a product to your audience. It's one of the things that Seth Godin, someone who I really admire, used to say, which is it's far easier to find products for your audience than an audience for your products. So it's far easier to build that community and then see what you can sell to them than the other way around. So we've also begun doing events. So we did the virtual community summit in London a couple of weeks ago. So that was around 200 people that attended the event, and we sold tickets at maybe £250 each. So again, like we are selling products to an audience that we knew wanted to buy these sorts of things. And you see lots of examples in this, and there's so many things that you can do. But usually, assuming you want to make some real money from this, you're going to have to be developing those sorts of products for your audience. And that usually means you have to go out of your comfort zone. You have to learn how to do that. You have to learn some online marketing stuff. But once you know what your audience wants, then it's far easier to develop those things and then sell to people that want to buy. I hope that helps. I hope that's kind of the answer you were looking for.
Awesome. Next up, we'll probably have one or two more questions. Including this one, just because we are coming up on time shortly. So Carolyn Cervani asks, I work with a group of folks who have limited tech skills, often feeling like they don't have the time to keep up with the online community. And many may not have the skills to be comfortable in an online community. What do you recommend to engage them further in the community?
So this is really difficult. If the audience isn't good at using technology or isn't comfortable with technology, we found it far more difficult to build a community or an online community anyway. We found it usually easier to use a very simple platform like a mailing list, something that comes to them. So all they have to do is hit reply, type their comment, and click send to participate in the community, rather than have to go to a site to log in to do all those sorts of things. So it's a very simple way of keeping that community going. So we found that is usually the simplest way of doing it. The more you can integrate email with the community, the better it will be. So that's a simple way of doing it. The other thing is to be more ambitious and to address that as a key issue. So if that's why people are not participating, then make the discussions about that topic. Make people comfortable about talking about it and gradually try and explain what the solution is. So perhaps train them to do that, perhaps tell them about the latest technology. Or if you want to be really sneaky, make the community a place where they can also complain about the latest technology, how it's advancing so far as well. So then they're likely to keep coming back there and having that bonding experience. But that's a really, really difficult situation to deal with. And I do wish you the best of luck with that.
Okay, so I think this will be our last question. This one
Sorry, I
is
can't be more help with
um, I think this will be our last question. This one is from Greg Schneider. He says that he is the president of the Hospice Volunteer Association, which is a great organization. And they created the Ning community of the Hospice Community Forum. They have about 1,300 members, and their community is free. So they've created a space where everyone can come and deal with death and grief issues. And he wonders, is it typical that communities are free for members to join? If the community transitions, and he also wonders if the community transitions to a paying community, he would expect that the population would likely diminish some. And he was just wondering if you had some reflections on this versus free communities versus paid communities?
Sure. I mean, we have a lot of very recent experience on this. So, for example, so we recently launched a community for community professionals ourselves, but it's a community about people that love the data and the science behind online communities. People that want to discuss like the psychology and the social psychology and stuff like that. So it's this community here. And this is a paid for online community. So if I log out, you have to pay to join. And we found that it works very well because it weeds out the people that aren't truly interested within that topic. And the people that join do actually tend to participate a lot. So a couple of things we've learned here is that you can't charge people that are paying for free. So if people aren't paying anything now, then if you start charging them for the same thing, then that's not going to work. The anchor price, the price that they're expecting to pay, is already zero. So anything on top of that is going to scare them away. So those people that are paying nothing now, you can't charge them. What you can do is that you can close the community at this point and charge future members of the community. So new people that join, they'll have to pay a small fee to participate. And if you're going to do that, you also need to offer some resources. So when they join, there's a bunch of things that they get straight away. The moment they join, there's a lot of things that they receive. So they can justify that in their mind. Instead of just having access to the community, there's something that they can justify, and there's a reason why they would want to join that type of community. And that's how you kind of justify the price as well. You have to offer them something that they actually want. And the other part of this is that there are different ways of going about this. So for example, most members probably won't want to do something that, or won't want to pay for something that they don't have any value with, or they don't have any, or they don't think has any value to them. But you can always offer new things to that community. So if you have an ebook, or if you're hosting events, it's easier to charge for those sorts of things. It's easy to find new things that you can charge for rather than just access to the community itself. Another thing we found is that if you're going to charge for a membership, then it's usually a good idea to make it an exclusive community as well. So if you want to apply to join this community, so this isn't supposed to be an advert at all, but the point I'm trying to make is that we want to know what you can offer the community, and we want to know your experience as well. We don't let everyone join. We only want people that really know what they're talking about in this community, which means that we turn people away and we lose money. But what we get is a type of community that people feel they can really connect with other people on, and people that have real expertise to share. We get the real experts as a result of that. So it's certainly a trade-off there that has to be made. And I'm not saying that's the easiest thing to do, but it definitely can be done. The only other thing I would add here actually is that part of this is semantics. For example, if you call it an association, then people are far more likely to pay for it. If you call it a group, then people are far more likely to pay for it. But with the term community, people seem to associate that with free. So you might want to consider what you actually call the site itself. And just by making a few changes here, you might be able to change the mindset that people have towards it. So yeah, I hope that helps.
Okay, I'm going to lie and I'm going to sneak in one more question if you think we have time for it,
You
Richard.
liar.
We've got a great question from Matthew Mezzi. I'm so sorry if I butchered that name. I know, Richard, that you're a huge data guy, so I thought this would be a great question to end on. Matthew asks, what other useful community data could he manage to extract from a charity LinkedIn group he runs? Beyond the number of new discussions and comments, which are themselves fairly fiddly to extract, there are things participants can do, such as likes on posts, but there seems to be no way to extract that other than entirely manually. So I don't know if you have any experience with LinkedIn groups, Richard, or if you could just offer some other general metrics that might be good for compiling community health data.
Sure. Unfortunately, I don't have that much experience on the data side of LinkedIn groups. We tend to use LinkedIn groups and mailing lists and things like that as a place to get the community going while the platform is being developed, get some activity going. and then move the community across to the new platform when it's live. So by the time we launch the actual platform, we have a lot of people that are keen to use it, that already have a lot of relationships with one another. So we don't usually dwell, or we don't usually delve that deep into the data side of things at that point. On a more broader sense, what we typically find is that the metrics you get from any platform are never good enough. And you usually have to manually go in there to extract the data that you really need. And I know that's quite a difficult thing to do, and it takes a lot of time, but it tells you most of the things that you need to do to make that community a success. We go into this in a lot of detail in the book. So what we do is that there are different metrics to measure the return on investment and metrics that measure the health and the progress of the community. So we try to measure three specific things. One is how many members have made a contribution within the previous 30 days. This is a very good indication of how many active members you have. People that don't participate, they're fine, but they don't really contribute anything to the community itself. So how many members you have in the last 30 days is a very relevant figure. The second thing is the total number of posts that you've received, and more importantly, the average number of posts per active member. So we want to know not only how many members are participating, but how many posts are they making. So there's a big difference between, say, 100 members that make one post a month and 100 members that make 100 posts a month. Clearly, the latter is a far more active, more engaged community. And the final thing we measure is the sense of community. So the sense of community is a concept whereby people feel a psychological sense of community. The communities that last the longest, the communities that usually have the highest return on investment, the communities that are most active, are nearly always those that have a very strong sense of community. So we measure this via a survey that we call we didn't create it, but it's called the Sense of Community Index. So you can look this up, it's SCI2. So this was created by a friend of mine called David Chavez, who runs a community science. So this is a system that they use to measure offline communities. But just by changing and tweaking a couple of things, you can see how I can apply to online communities. So it's a survey here. So I get the important needs of mine met because I'm part of the community. Community members and I value the same things. And people will just go through it and they answer the question, and it takes not much time at all. And then based upon that, you can see what specific things you both need to work on to improve the sense of community. So is it, for example, the reinforcement of some needs? Is it membership? Does it need to be easier for members to identify who is a member, who isn't? Does there need to be a bigger barrier to entry, for example? Is it influence? Do you need to give members more influence within that community? Do you need to give them more opportunities to lead, to get involved, to create content, to feel like they own that community, they can influence that community? Or is it having a shared emotional connection? Do members of the community actually know the other people in that community? Do they feel a sense of connection to the other people that are in that community? Do they feel, for example, that they can talk about the most difficult issues to talk about? Do they have the emotional mindset that they feel the same emotions at the same time as other members? And if not, you can be provoking more emotive types of discussions that are going to get people more engaged in that type of community. So those are the three core things we measure. It is the number of active members within the last 30 days, the number of posts that have been made in that community, but more specifically, the number of posts per active member, or the average number of posts per active member, and then the sense of community score, the average sense of community score. Once we have those metrics, we have a very good idea of how healthy that community is and how far that community has progressed along the community life cycle as well. So I know that's not usually something that you can get out of a LinkedIn group just on a simple data sense, but it's worth looking at these sorts of things because it gives you much more useful and more actionable information as well. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Richard, for that answer, and thank you for this whole hour of answers. I think we've covered a really great collection of topics, and I think we've had a lot to think about So we'll be putting up this recorded presentation on our Ning blog at cultivate.ning.com, and we'll also be emailing it out to everyone that attended later today when the recording's completed, so that you can revisit it if you missed any questions, if you were taking notes so furiously that you just couldn't catch everything. So I just want to thank everyone for participating in this webinar today, everyone who asked questions beforehand and everyone who asked questions. We've still got a lot that we didn't get a chance to answer, so we'll have a dedicated follow-up blog post to this, answering some of those questions as well. And thank you, mostly Richard, for taking the time out of your busy schedule to answer all of these wonderful questions.
Thanks a lot.
Okay, thanks everyone. Bye-bye.